Suddenly, Mother appeared at the doorway and shouted, "Did you get Tweety's basket?" Tweety. We shuddered. Ed Tweety lived about 3 miles west of town in a canvas-covered sheep cape. He had at least 5 of the meanest dogs in captivity.
Everyone has a home. Everyone has an origin, and our stories are so important and valuable.
My grandpa and his colleagues got a kick out of Ross's irreverence and, demeanor in meetings and asking questions that he probably shouldn't have been asking, and everybody kind of chuckled at that.
It's obviously strong.
People love him, and he's just one of those welcoming people. I really look up to him.
He was the greatest history teacher that's ever lived.
Grandpa Ross.
F. Ross Peterson.
Grandpa Ross.
Ross.
Grandpa Ross.
F. Ross Peterson.
My name is F. Ross Peterson, and I was born in this hometown of Montpelier, Idaho.
F. Ross Peterson is a very fine person. Contrary to some of the stories he tells about his youth,
Everything he does seems to be motivated by a desire to reach out, to help someone or serve someone.
and there's never been a person that he hasn't loved to talk to.
He impacts people so profoundly. He sees people deeper than you can see them from the outside. People are important to him, and he'll be remembered forever because of that.
In 1999, one of my friends and former students, John Miller, asked if I'd come to his home in Deer Valley to tell my favorite Christmas story to his employees and neighbors. I thought, well, I'll just write one. And so I remembered my very first Christmas, right at the end of World War II, and I wrote the first one about that. And then I read it and gave it to my children and grandchildren, and then I got thinking, they never knew my parents. And so each year after then, I've written a story.
Once he got telling his Christmas stories, they just started flowing.
Grandpa Ross is really good at telling stories.
For as long as I can remember, every year on Christmas Eve, Grandpa reads his Christmas story.
Every year I'm reminded of giving.
It's one of our favorite traditions as a family. We gather around and he reads the story out loud for us.
Dad worked for the Civic Fruit Express.
It was amazing how those little children would sit and listen to Grandpa tell those stories.
You can tell when he reads them that they mean a lot to him. They aren't just cool stories, they're the building blocks of his life. There's a point almost every year when he gets really emotional.
One of the least of these, my brother and he have done it unto me.
And sometimes even has to pass the story on to someone else to have them finish reading it. Listening to him read them has helped me to realize how special these stories really are.
In 2020 during COVID, one of my friends persuaded me to put them together and publish them as a book.
The ultimate why is this feels like a really peaceful, tender love letter to Logan, to nostalgia, certainly to Montpelier and the personal connections that Ross has to those places and people. But it feels like what we need right now.
Glancing up at the tree, I spotted a little ornament which was a baby in a manger.
The Christmas stories showcase the characteristics that he has tried to embody throughout his life, ultimately all of them pointing back to Jesus Christ. It helps us to remember the type of people that we should be and that every person is important.
I like to listen to Grandpa Ross's stories because they remind me to be like Jesus.
Tweety shifted his attention to us. You boys think you're the wise men? Well, I ain't no baby Jesus. Can't do much about his being born. Do even less about his dying. Just live what he taught. I can't do it. Won't do it. But won't do you no harm.
There was just an appeal to this book.
And I thought, man, wouldn't that be cool to turn that into a one-man show?
Last spring, late in the spring, Richie Call asked if he could speak with me. He said the Theater Arts Department thought as a fundraiser they'd like to have me participate. And I said, what are you talking about? You're not going to throw me into a play. I can't remember that. I said, what do you mean? And he said, well, we'd like your permission to turn the stories into a play.
Do you want me to do something here left, right for Mom, or do you want it out front?
And I said, well, you can do it on a bunch of conditions. One, the money has to go for students. Two, I don't want any part of it. You know, what you do, you do. And then later they called me and said that two of my friends, Mary Hears,
Turns out my 6 favorite stories came in about 50 minutes.
was going to do the adaptation, and Stephanie White would direct. And then Richie said, and I'll play you. And I said, all right. I can't say I'm nervous. I'm really apprehensive, but we'll see how it goes. It's just playing the kid. Well, I don't want people to think I was that way when I was an adult, because some of the stories are a little mischievous.
The content was just so sweet and so tender that it seemed like something that I would really like to work on myself.
I worked very closely with Richie to begin, and then with Mary Hears, and then Mary and I would take it to see what would make sense as far as one person on a stage telling a story that's separate from how you read.
I don't have you coming down.
Pretty early on in the process, she determined that the best way to do this was just to use Ross's words.
So that was the first process. And then the next was taking that trip to Montpelier and seeing the place and seeing the M on the mountain, the high school, just getting a sense of the shape of the village, so that then you can now create with the production team the set design, the projections, how much music are you going to incorporate into it. I loved seeing through his eyes the story and the places, and seeing like the original barn. We walked to the baseball field and saw where Mrs. Scrooge's house was.
Then you'd have the race. One of us would go down around that corner.
And seeing him point out everything and have that little laugh that he does, it was just delightful.
I've heard him tell other people it's a little difficult for him to know that somebody else is working on this material. It is intimidating for me to essentially play Ross knowing that Ross is going to be in the audience. So it's not just a matter of memorizing his words, it's a matter of figuring out why he chooses to go to the next part of a story at any given time. And you know, Ross is Ross, so like that path is very unique, right? And it's all part of the storytelling because he's a fantastic storyteller. Ed Tweedy rode up on his mule, followed by the dogs. He had the flour sack and a few other things. It seems he had ridden into town and heard the story. Privacy does not exist in a small town. Tweedy motioned my dad over. He returned our gifts and also gave my dad a blanket that he had bought himself. Then the old man said to us, "Just live it."
When Richie walked out on the stage, and he looked very much like Ross, and he totally nailed it with telling those stories, I thought.
I hope people enjoy it. It's not what you had in mind when you wrote them, I'll tell you that. Because my original audience was just my family. I've learned that all memories aren't perfect, and I just say write your own. We boys sat looking on in total silence. And the idea of leaving that as part of your legacy is your own trail through life. It might still be alive.
I think what he hopes is that people will just write your stories. You don't even have to care too much about what's the accurate version of them. Just write, and if you remember it differently than somebody else, that's okay.
I think it's really important that we record our own stories so the people who come after us can learn from the experiences that we've had.
This feels like a nostalgic slideshow. We hope it's like that. We hope it's like going back to the old reels that you see of your family. I hope it puts them in the Christmas spirit. You know, I hope that they recognize how important it is to give to others and to laugh.
I hope people will have a great time. I hope they'll be smiling from ear to ear. I hope they will, if not write their stories, at least share their stories.
In no way did he remind us of Santa Claus.
Talk to their families about their past Christmases and all those tender experiences they have in their head, because at a certain point, at a certain point, the people who can tell those stories won't be there anymore.
It means a lot because it's all about family, and Each of you has a story.